Hi, this is Joel Selvin, and you're listening to Your Morning Coffee, the podcast, with my friends Jay Gilbert and Mike Etchart, weekly music news for the new music business.
For music business worldwide, key insights from the latest IFPI Global Music Report.
Directly from Spotify, music economic site Loud and Clear, updated with 2021 figures.
And from Bloomberg, what crypto enthusiasts get wrong about entertainment. Oh yeah, we got a lot to cover. These are exciting and detailed stories. My friend Jay and I will wax poetic about all of them on episode number 85. Sit back and relax because this is the Your Morning Coffee podcast.
Stand by for transmission.
This is London calling.
Wake up! The revolution is at hand! Your morning coffee is on the air. On the air. On the air. On the air. On the air.
Standing by.
Your morning coffee, the weekly music news for the new music business. It's the highly curated, agitated, advocated, moderated, and liberated digital music information that you need to know. We are your digital music authority. And now from our studios in Hollywood, California, here's your hosts, Jay Gilbert and Mike Etchart.
Well, Jay, it is a Saturday morning for us as we record our show.
Yeah.
A groovy good morning to you. How are you?
Good morning. Doing well. I'm caffeinated
And
ready to
And
go.
as per our usual, we are starting at 9:35, even though we logged on at 9 o'clock. And we have been conversing about all kinds of things since then.
Yeah, and that's kind of what this podcast is our coffee talk just with the record button, right?
That's right. That's exactly right. And as I mentioned to you when we started chatting, I got a chance to see Gang of Four up in San Francisco this last Monday night, and was mightily impressed. What a great band. And they are back out on the road with, I wouldn't say exactly all original. Well, one of the original members, Andy Gill, passed away, but and so they have a new guitar player who's fantastic, plays very much in the similar style of him, and
Nice.
I'm glad I had my earplugs in that night. To be honest,
Pretty
'Cause it was
loud?
a loud, post-punk show in a
Nice.
very small venue, which was a blast. But
Very cool.
I'm getting to that age, Jay, where I need to put earplugs in if it's a little too loud. I don't want to have my ears ringing the next morning, right?
Yeah, I get it. I'm going to go see Delamitri tonight. That should be a lot of fun. They're playing the
those
Canyon
guys.
Club, which is really, a stone's throw from my house. So I'm kind of spoiled. You know how it is in LA. You have to drive like an hour anywhere. And for this
Yes.
one, I could, practically walk.
Oh, that'll be fun. A great show.
Yeah.
They're Scottish, aren't they? I'm trying to remember. They're not.
I don't know.
I think they're Scottish. But yeah, what a great band
Yeah.
from the. Were they late 80s into the 90s? I'm even now forgetting when they
I've
were.
been listening to those guys for so long. I mean, they're more hooks than a tackle box. It's they're just super melodic bands. So Delamitri,
and
tonight. That should be fun.
And we share the love of melodic bands.
Yes, we do.
Without a doubt. And the man that I share the love of the melodic bands is none other than my good buddy Jay Gilbert. He, as you must know by now, is the co-founder of music marketing and strategy company Label Logic. He is the curator of the Your Morning Coffee newsletter and a former executive with Universal Music, Sony Music, and Warner Music Groups. And he is the dean of the University of Musical Perversity.
And my longtime friend and co-host here is Mike Etchart. He was a host of Sound and Vision Radio, formerly of SST Records, Warner Music, Capital EMI, and Universal Music. And my go-to guy when I want to hear like what cool documentaries are out.
Yes. And, I was on my trip to San Francisco because I think I went to Sacramento couple of weeks before that, and that's on Southwest Airlines. That's where I watched the Sparks documentary, which I love so much.
Yeah.
I watched it again.
Oh, really?
On my trip to San Francisco.
Wow, that says a lot.
Oh, it's a great documentary. God, you gotta check it out.
It's on my list. I'm definitely going to get there. You know, the other one that's coming up that I'm really excited about is that there's a documentary coming on John Waite on his career.
Yes.
And,
Yes,
I know a little bit about
John
the
a lot.
story. Yeah, because I've had the pleasure of working with John for many years, and there are a lot of turns on that road, and it's going to be a really great documentary.
Well, Jay, we must reach out and mention, of course, our sponsors with whom we could not do this show. I want to thank the Music Business Association. The 4-day Music Biz 2022 conference agenda has just been announced, taking place May 9th through 12th at the JW Marriott in Nashville, along with returning favorites like the Metadata Summit, hashtag Next Gen
Easy for
Now.
you to say.
Easy for me to say. DSP workshops and brand summit, to name just a few. You'll find timely new additions for 2022, including conversations on NFTs, gaming and immersive music experiences, catalog acquisitions, and much, much, much more. Go jump over to musicbiz.org for more information.
Yes, sir. And I'll see you there. Your Morning Coffee podcast is also brought to you by our friends at Bandzoogle. Built by musicians for musicians, Bandzoogle is an all-in-one platform. Makes it super easy to build a beautiful website and EPK for your music. All the features you need for a professional website are already built in, like hosting and a custom domain name, dozens of fully customizable design templates, tools to sell your music and merch commission-free crowdfunding and fan subscription features, mailing list tools to grow your fan list and send newsletters, social media integrations, and live support from their musician-friendly team 7 days a week. Your Morning Coffee podcast listeners can go to bandzoogle.com. Try it for free for 30 days. Just use the promo code Morning Coffee, all one word, Morning Coffee. That'll get you 15% off your first year of any subscription. That's bandzoogle.com, promo code Morning Coffee.
And we are also sponsored by Hypebot. Since 2004, Hypebot has chronicled the new music industry and the trends and technologies that are changing how music is discovered, consumed, marketed, and monetized. It is edited daily by founder Bruce Houghton with help from Alana Bonilla. Hypebot and sister blog Music Think Tank are published by live music discovery and marketing platform Bands in Town.
Speaking of Bands in Town, over 65 million live music fans trust Bands in Town to get personalized concert alerts, recommendations, and messages from their favorite artists. It's the #1 artist services platform connecting over 550,000 artists with their superfans. Managers, labels, agencies, and artists access their own dashboard to manage and promote their tour dates across all platforms.
That would be Music Business Association, Bandzoogle, Hypebot, and Bands in Town. Big thanks to all of them, because we certainly appreciate it. And Jay, we have so much to cover. We should jump right in. It's the IFPI Global Music Report. This is from Music Business Worldwide. We're talking about key insights from that latest report.
Yeah.
And, it's almost worth mentioning, we keep talking about the big year of 1999 and how that was just a enormous year for the music industry. That was the first year I was at Universal, actually.
Yeah. I think that's right when we started working together.
Yeah, we did indeed. And so, it's sort of mentioned in the article I think we're going to talk about, but, I had to think back to what exactly made that year so big. And that was really, it was right on the cusp, right, of CDs just being enormous, but boy, right on the horizon, it's like the, in the Lord of the Rings, when they're walking towards Mordor and they see that, the flames and everything kind of over the hillside in the distance. It's like that was brewing in the distance, which was file trading.
Yeah, it was just starting, hurrah. Right? And what really made 1999 so big in the music industry was, as you mentioned, CDs were, at their peak, but it was also boy bands. It was also Britney Spears. And let's not forget, it was also big box retail. So instead of just having Tower Records, Warehouse, Musicland, FYE, we started seeing things in, Best Buy, for example, and Target and Walmart, and some of these other stores started jumping on that CD bandwagon. And what happened there was this race to the bottom when it came to pricing. So it just blew up. Everybody was buying CDs everywhere at that time. But right underneath all of that, the original Napster was, launching and picking up traction, and just quietly, these things like LimeWire and things like that were coming along, and people were downloading, music for free. And we didn't know what was about to hit us.
We didn't know it was about to hit us, and that's probably the thing that I think about the most, which is, wow, at the time we were just whistling down the road, and how great business was. And like you said, it was, and I remember very distinctly Best Buy, and Best Buy at the time was using CDs as a loss leader to get people in the store and sell them a washing machine or sell them a television.
That's right.
And it was, they were a huge customer, but they were also just a disruptive customer, because we were getting pushback from all the independent stores in a given town that were saying, hey, I cannot compete with these guys. And then that brought in MAP, the minimum advertised price you could do, and all kinds of stuff changes at that time in the physical world.
Do you remember a gentleman named Gary Schenk that we used to work with? His office was next to mine. He ended up later working for Bill Gates, but really great guy, super smart guy. His office was next to mine. And I remember when I first heard about Napster, and it was in 1998. And I put it on my computer and took a look at it, and I knocked on the office wall and I said, Gary, you got to come over here. And he came into my office and I said, name a band. And he named a band. I typed them in, and everything just showed up. And I said, I can download this and listen to it for free. He's like, oh my God. I mean, we knew it was the end of an era. Just looking at that, I mean, our hearts dropped, and it moved like wildfire and really affected the business. But as we're going to talk about today with this IFPI report, we've had 7 consecutive years of global revenue growth. And I think the point you were trying to make is, even though we're hitting this dollar amount that's higher than 1999, that when you adjust for inflation, it's really not as big as 1999, but it's still very, very impressive.
Absolutely. And so we're going back to 2014 now. And when you look at it, it's a gain of 18.5% in the global recorded music market growth, which is not insignificant. Last year we had a 7.2, and before that 7.8. So this is like it's been steady since 2014, but it's a big jump this year. Absolutely.
Yeah, and we should point out that a couple of weeks ago, you and I talked about the RIAA report. That was U.S. only. These numbers for IFPI, this is global. So one of the things we'll talk about is, when you break down, where does this revenue come from? Globally, it's 65% streaming, whereas in the United States, it's really more, I think, 83%. So I'd like to talk about that. I'm kind of skipping ahead here, but I'd like to talk about where that revenue comes from globally, because I think it's really interesting. So a little over 2% comes from sync, getting music and film, TV commercials, TV shows, games. So about 2% comes from sync, which, we've talked about that before. It seems low. In the United States, I think it was like $300 million. And we thought it should have been maybe more than that. Maybe it's underreported. But then you get to the performance rights organizations. It's 9.4%. Here's the one that surprised me a little bit. Physical globally is over 19% of the business. And as you point out frequently, what could that number have been if there weren't the issues with producing and shipping vinyl?
Right, absolutely. We've talked numerous times about the challenges and how backed up production is. We just can't get enough product out there. So that number could be, let's just say, 25% physical, which would be remarkable in this day and age.
Yeah.
I also want to touch, though, on the worldwide number of users of paid subscription, because we are now talking about 500 million people that are paid subscribers worldwide.
Right.
523 million. So, and that's growing, but boy, that is a big, big number. And and of course, this equates to big numbers, what we're talking about. So, when we talk about the changes from that big year of 1999, we have such an enormous people of paying a monthly subscription fee.
Yeah.
And again, what a dramatic change that has been, as we've talked about many times.
Yeah.
It used to be a very cyclical business based on everything, on success of certain albums, but now that constant revenue coming in the door has changed everything.
Yeah, and it has slowed down a little bit on the paid side as a percentage of growth, and we'll cover that in this Music Business Worldwide article in a second. But it was really surprising to see that ad-supported, the free tier has grown almost 18%. But globally, just subscription audio streams are up 47% year over year globally, which is absolutely amazing. The only thing that went down, and this is the same with the RIAA report, is downloads globally were down almost 11%. Physical was up, it says here 16%, and performance rights was up just slightly 4%, and sync, even though that was a lower number, was up 22%. And the top markets, this always surprises me when I look at the top global markets, because it may not be what you assume it is. We talk about the UK a lot, and I think that I just, in my mind, I think of them as kind of the number 2 market next to the United States, but it's really Japan. So the top 10, US, Japan, number 3 is UK, 4, Germany, 5, France, 6, China. That surprised me. 7, South Korea, which does more than Canada, which is number 8. Number 9 is Australia, and 10, Italy. And that really kind of surprised me. What did you take from that?
Well, we talk about Japan, and Japan, as we've mentioned a number of times, it was kind of the last holdouts of really substantial physical sales, but they are making that transition to streaming as well. I was kind of surprised to see them that far up, to be honest, like you said.
Yeah, because I think they have like 89 Tower Records stores in Japan,
still,
if I'm not mistaken.
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, they still are holding out and still love that physical product.
But I don't think it's really broken down this way here, but I wonder, it would be interesting to see the percentage of physical with each of the top markets.
Yeah,
because I got to think that Japan is still going to be and because physical is such a substantial number, I wonder if Japan is heavily weighted in physical relative to streaming, even though they're making the transition.
Yeah.
But again, and it's interesting to see. This is all basically kind of the G7, G10 companies, except for China in there and South Korea. But South Korea is one as well. So. But it's just remarkable to see that we are still at the top in the USA.
Yeah, but look at the growth.
Maybe we'd be losing that.
Look at the growth in that next kind of chart that they have, the figures by region. Talk about that a little bit, because it's not just what position you're in. Let's look at the percentage increase year over year for some of these regions.
Yeah, so look, you're taking Latin America, 31%, a little over 31% year-over-year growth, and so even in our day in the record business, we would in those days principally talk about Japan. Of course, was always a large country, and then Europe, the UK, and then the US. Those were kind of it. Now we're talking about Middle East and North Africa with a 35% increase.
Wow.
On here is Sub-Saharan Africa, almost 10%. Australasia, 4.1%. We're talking about regions now in the world that historically have not been something that we talked about. I mean, certainly international folks would know about them, but we're really seeing a huge growth in streaming opportunities in these unique areas.
Yeah,
unique to us.
Yeah, that was really impressive to me, because USA and Canada year over year had 22% overall growth, those regions, and as you just pointed out, the Middle East and North Africa overperformed that. It was 35% growth. So that's super impressive. I wanted to kind of see, because I hear this a lot, when someone says, oh, well, vinyl is up, but that's all Adele, or, which isn't entirely true, but she certainly had some pretty big numbers. It is true to say that releases from the biggest global artists really shaped those global charts and grew that revenue. And those like that, the 5 that they point out, BTS, of course, right? Taylor Swift, Adele, Drake, and Ed Sheeran. So But every year you're going to have, these kinds of artists. A chart that I'd love to kind of review with you that, man, I love this so much. They pulled out the global vinyl bestsellers. So not just the RIAA in the United States, but this is globally. And it might surprise some people because, you do have, Olivia Rodrigo, at number 4, but you've got Fleetwood Mac Rumors at number 3.
I know it. By the way, I want to jump back for a second, though, before we talk about that.
Sure.
One of the things, let's talk about Taylor Swift for a second. It said Taylor Swift sold more vinyl than any other artist in 2021, driven by the Taylor's version releases of Red and Fearless. The whole thing with Taylor Swift and her re-records, we've talked about it before, but I still want to bring it up because it's unheard of. Many artists we know over the years have re-recorded their albums because they don't have the rights themselves, so they re-record them. And it's always been kind of a dirty little secret in the business. Taylor Swift has managed, and her team have managed to kind of flip the switch and make it a cool thing.
Right.
And have made it so, and these are releases that she, of course, controls.
Yeah.
And that is a stunning.
Let's talk about that for a second because you make a really good point. When you sign a recording contract, there's a clause in the contract that says you can't re-record those songs, and then there's a term, right? And when that term expires, then you can. And typically artists will do re-records for sync because it's a negotiated rate for sync licensing, and they want to use their own version of the song, and they'll record it and make it sound as close to the original as possible, close enough to where they can land some sync licensing fees for that. But Taylor took it a whole different direction and really went in there and re-recorded these albums, not just for sync, but for the streaming services and for physical goods. And as you point out, it's really unprecedented.
Yes, absolutely. So anyway, back to the global vinyl chart. Yeah, shockingly to see Fleetwood Mac, a record that came out, Rumors, in 1977, I think. And here it is, still on the charts, on the vinyl charts. Of course, at number 11, we have Queen's Greatest Hits. At number 12, we have ABBA Voyage. I think that's their new one.
Well, yeah, and number 7, an even older record, the Beatles' Abbey Road.
Abbey Road, yeah.
Dark
Number
Side
8
of
is
the Moon.
Nirvana, Nevermind. Number 9 is Pink Floyd, Dark Side of the Moon. Then we've got another Taylor Swift. And we've got, Let It Be. We've got Amy Winehouse, Back to Black, which is now, how long? That's been out for a while now, of course.
Yeah.
And then, so it's really interesting. But number 20, this one kind of blew me away, to be honest. Lana Del Rey, Chemtrails Over the Country Club, made it on the top 20 list for vinyl. So good.
191,000 sold of that release. Remarkable. There were a few surprises on here for me. I didn't realize that Kendrick Lamar had sold almost 200,000 vinyl units globally. Either, yeah. And then, Bob Marley and the Wailers, legend, 213,000 units. And again, we have to kind of preface this by saying these are great numbers, but what could they have been?
They could have been more.
Yeah.
They could have been higher, which is remarkable. Yeah. And I think it's probably not an insane suggestion to add 25% to all these numbers if supply was truly meeting demand.
Yeah.
So that's pretty remarkable when we talk about it.
Yeah.
So it's fascinating stuff in this report, and it's really worth checking out. And again, it's really the exclamation point on its markets that we are very familiar with, but it's also these developing markets and how they are really coming up in this chart, and we'll continue to do so.
Yeah,
so
and let's talk about,
healthy.
That this report is awesome, and we'll be digging through it. There's 2 versions of it, as Tim Ingham points out in his article for Music Business Worldwide. There's kind of the free version, and then there's a version that you pay for. We're kind of reviewing the free version, although we just got the paid-for version. But what I love about Tim Ingham's piece, and the headline is "Free Music Streaming Paid the Record Industry $4.6 billion in 2021." The other key insights from the latest IFPI Global Music Report. So let's take a look at some of his insights. One is ad-funded streaming is generating nearly as much revenue for the global music industry as physical formats, and it grew by $1.1 billion in 2021. That's remarkable. He says that annual paid-for streaming revenues, bounced up to $2.2 billion. They bounced up that much by $2.2 billion to $12.3 billion last year. So ad-funded, as we talked about, is still growing, as well as paid. Paid is still growing, but not as a percentage like it was. It's definitely slowed down. And, as we point out, there's really good news on the physical format side. CD and vinyl combined grew revenues to $5 billion in 2021, up from $4.3 billion in 2020. So all of these different areas, other than kind of downloads, they're all growing in a big way, and the revenue is massive.
Yeah. And as he said, here comes China and Italy and India and the Middle East. One of the most remarkable stats to emerge was the annual revenues from every individual country. Somewhere around 70 territories tracked by the IFPI grew in 2021. Wow. And so we're talking about, again, these areas like Africa, Middle East, and Asia and China, just growing and popping up on these lists. And again, these are countries that certainly international departments were aware of, but these are really becoming big players in the global music industry, and it's a worldwide business in a way that it wasn't before.
Yeah, and they also talk about your favorite thing, ARPU.
ARPU,
average revenue per user. There's a slowdown in the growth, as we just mentioned, of users. Just a slight slowdown in the growth of the users of paid streaming, but the average revenue per user, ARPU, is going up a little bit, and that's a positive thing. Music Business Worldwide, Tim Ingham and his team, calculated that the approximate ARPU, the number came out to be about $23.52 per year, which is about $1.96 per month. And that sounds really low when you think about, well, wait a second, I'm paying $10 a month for mine. But there's so many, free subscriptions, student subscriptions, free trials, things like that. And all of that on average lowers that ARPU. But when you're talking about more than 500 million users, even a small increase makes a huge difference.
Yes. And I'm wondering if we're going to see rates go up a little bit this coming year for the subscription rates for individual customers. I kind of hope so, because it's still such a bargain. It really is an inexpensive thing, and I would like to see that happen. However, as he points out, inflation and not getting carried away.
There it is.
He said, as you can see in the below chart, lifted from the IFPI's GMR, Global Recorded Music Trade revenues hit their largest volume on record in 2021. The $25.9 billion generated in the year bested for the first time the worldwide record industry's previous peak of 1999, when it generated $24.1 billion. That's a historic milestone, but what they aren't shouting about, because it's like the reality is there's a different angle. Inflation, the gradual eroding of the worth of a single unit of currency, is very much a present concern for businesses and consumers. Obviously, we've got an annual inflation rate right now of 7.9% predicted for this coming year. To this end, it's worth using reverse inflation to discover what the $24.1 billion figure from 1999 would be worth at the close of 2021. And the answer is a little over $39 billion. So, yes, it's been an epic year, but adjusted for inflation, that 1990 year would be almost $40 billion.
Right, and you're comparing that to about $26 billion, which is what we hit this year. So, it's... Yeah, if you adjust for inflation, we have a little bit of ways to go, but it's pretty impressive still. Growth in all those 70 countries, like you mentioned. Pretty much every format other than digital downloads is growing. It's growing in a big way, and I think that's really great news for our business.
Yes, it is. Yes, it is. Well, speaking of the business, let's jump over to this from Spotify directly. The music economics site Loud and Clear updated with 2021 figures. And we always talk about this. It is an absolutely gorgeous piece of documentary, piece of creation of this sort of deck. It is beautiful.
They do this each year. It's so beautiful as they lay this out. You and I were talking earlier just about visually stunning how Spotify puts this report together every week. And as we get in, we're going to talk about the 10 takeaways from this Loud and Clear report. And if you want to read through it, and there's a great message from Daniel Ek. There's all sorts of stats and figures. If you're into that sort of thing, the link is in your morning coffee. But as you go to the site, there's a few sentences that kind of set it up. And it says that artists deserve clarity about the economics of music streaming. Last year, we launched this site to increase transparency by sharing new data on Spotify's royalty payments and breaking down the global streaming economy, the players, and the process. The data shows the music industry is healthier than it's been in a long time, and more artists are finding more success than ever before. But we're nowhere near done, and we'll keep pushing to grow the industry. So let's talk about those 10 takeaways.
Sure. So number one is in 2021, Spotify paid out more than any other service and set the record for the highest annual payment from any single retailer in history. In 2021, the number was $5 billion. In 2020, the number was $5 billion. In 2021, it was $7 billion. And as they say, we paid music rights holders more money than ever in 2021. That's a little over $7 billion, up from $5 billion in 2020. That's more than double what we paid out in 2017, which was $3.3 billion, and represents a big part of the $30 billion we've paid to rights holders since our founding.
Yeah.
Even adjusting for inflation, the $7 billion total is the largest sum paid by one retailer to the music industry in 1 year in history, including any single retailer at the height of the CD or digital download.
That's pretty impressive.
It is impressive.
And we always talk about the number one streaming service for music is really YouTube, but it's not where the revenue is coming from. People have complained about the revenue that's paid out from YouTube forever, and hopefully we can get that fixed. So that was the number one takeaway, and that's pretty impressive. Number two, in 2021, streaming revenue alone exceeded total industry revenue from 2009 to 2016. Wow,
that's pretty amazing.
That is really, really amazing. It's a lot of money from streaming, and we've broken down the economics of streaming. Spotify and these DSPs are not, the bad guys in this situation. I think we have a really big pie now, and it's up to the industry to figure out how best to have those slices appropriately divvied up.
Yeah, exactly. Number three, for the first time, over 1,000 artists generated over $1 million on Spotify. That's a new landmark, they say.
Yeah.
But when artists hit new heights, it's time to launch additional milestones. New to the site in 2021, since so many artists have far surpassed the $1 million level, we've added $2 million and $5 million data to our site. So they say in 2021, 450 artists generated more than $2 million on Spotify, an increase of 110% in 5 years, and 130 artists generated over $5 million, an increase of 160% in the same period. So that is very interesting.
There are a lot of artists, indie and major label signed artists, making a lot of money from streaming, and Spotify in particular here. And if you scroll down in this site, if you want to explore it, they have this beautiful interface and these kind of bouncing balls that you can click on and see all these different revenue milestones and how many artists have achieved it. But 1,000 artists with over $1 million just from Spotify, that's surprising to a lot of people. The next one, over 50,000 artists generated $10,000 from Spotify alone, and likely over $40,000 across all recorded revenue sources. That's 50,000 artists. So those that say that, streaming doesn't pay, well, it is challenging for developing and middle-class artists. But if you are the rights holder, there is revenue to be made. It says more artists are hitting these milestones across all revenue levels, from $1,000 to $5 million, and the numbers are accelerating fast. The number of artists who achieved each of these milestones has doubled since 2017. That's impressive. And when taking into account earnings from other services and recorded revenue streams, these artists are likely to be generating 4 times these numbers.
Not bad.
Pretty incredible.
Not bad. I mean, it's somewhat encouraging. The next one, the fifth one they mention is major record labels earned over $4 billion in profit in 2021, driven by streaming. Spotify payments represent around a third of that streaming total. Major label profits in 2021 exceeded $4 billion, meaning more money to reinvest to grow the industry.
Right. And that's one revenue stream, right? There's, like we talked about before, there's sync licensing, there's merch, there's touring, there's physical goods, CDs and vinyl when we can ship it.
And the three major labels, by the way, jointly brought in over $25 billion in revenue last year.
And then the other revenue source that we don't talk about enough, I think, well, you and I do, is, for the second year running, Spotify paid out more than $1 billion to publishing. That's incredible. And that goes to songwriters, typically, songwriters and producers, through their publishing companies. That generated record revenues, and that's all driven by streaming services. Publishing rights holders earned $3.5 billion from streaming in 2020. And that sum is more than the publishing revenue from CDs and downloads any year in the 21st century. Wow.
Right. But let's not forget, they also are trying to pay less for publishing.
That's right. We won't get into that whole CRB discussion again, but you're absolutely right.
Just saying.
They're fighting it. You got it.
I'm just saying.
You got it.
That's right. So the number 7 was the industry at the height of the CD era favored the top 50 artists twice as much as today.
That surprised me.
Very interesting. Yes, it does. Me too. Absolutely. More artists are sharing in today's thriving music economy than ever before. As I mentioned, in the peak of the CD era, nearly 25% of U.S. album sales were accounted for by the top 50 artists. On Spotify in 2021, only 12% of U.S. streams were of the top 50 artists, meaning that revenue opportunities now reach far beyond the superstars.
Yeah, it may not be the long tail, but it's certainly not just the head of the rat.
Yeah, exactly.
Number 8, over 28% of artists who generated over $10,000 self-distribute to Spotify. Wow.
That's fascinating.
That's almost a third of those that generated over $10,000 are using things like, TuneCore, DistroKid, CD Baby, Stem. They're kind of this DIY thing. And that's impressive. That was over 15,000 artists, and that represents a 171% increase in just the last 5 years. So that's pretty impressive.
Very much so. Absolutely. The number 9 is artists can go from zero to career faster than ever. Streaming has lowered the barriers to entry to music and accelerated the path to finding a global fan base, meaning artists can go from first single to first significant paycheck fast. Over 10% of the artists, about 5,300, who generated more than $10,000 on Spotify in 2021 released their first song ever in the last 2 years. In 2021, 350 of them generated $100,000 from Spotify alone.
Yeah.
So that's kind of nice as well.
It is, and I think TikTok has a lot to do with that. And
Yes.
and just having those 70 million tracks in your pocket, on your phone, whatever your DSP of choice is. And then really the last one, and I thought this is really a good sign for our industry. 34% of artists who generated more than $10,000 on Spotify live in countries outside of the top 10 music markets. So we're hitting more independent artists and we're hitting more different markets. Streaming revenue is bringing real scale to the music industries of emerging markets. And I think that's crucial for our business. It makes it increasingly possible to pursue a professional career as an artist in countries around the world. So, I see this as all really positive news. We're reaching a lot more people. There's a lot more free subscribers, which I don't think is super healthy for our business, but there's a lot more paid subscribers, and the overall pie is getting bigger and bigger. Now we just need to address those things that you and I talk about frequently, like how much people are paid, for these streams and how that pie is broken up.
And the publishing issue for
Yeah,
sure.
absolutely.
But, when I look at this deck, or it's not really a deck, but I mean this presentation
Sure
document,
looks like one.
It's beautiful.
Yeah.
I wonder how many people at Spotify are in the department of this stuff. I mean, it's got to be like a huge team that is able to collate and again, a lot of this is kind of feel good stuff. It's like it's so parsing through the data, presenting it in a manner which kind of is the narrative of what they're trying to present, and then just the beautiful production of these things is pretty remarkable. It's got to be a gigantic department that's obviously working on this stuff around the clock, year round.
Yeah, well, I can tell you from working with data, it's really challenging to present data in a way that is appealing and interesting and where you can kind of tell at a glance. And you and I talked about this with that article called Twitch's Rockonomics by Will Page. Just the beauty of that presentation laid it out. And this is very similar to that, where the graphics are just so well laid out and everything's kind of in bite-sized chunks, because most people don't like to read a lot of text today. And they know that, so they put these things together in these little bullet point, bite-sized chunks with some visuals that help you lock it in. So kudos to the Spotify team. They put together this website called Loud and Clear, and again, there's a link to it. And they've updated all of these figures for 2021 year over year, and it's really impressive.
Yeah, nice job. Well, our last story of the day, Jay, is from Bloomberg. What crypto enthusiasts get wrong about entertainment. And this is really interesting because of so much going on with NFTs and cryptocurrency and all that stuff. And there's also a lot of stuff coming out about the flip side of it, the kind of the dark side, the negative side of these things.
Yeah.
But in this article, it says artists can now make a project without a studio or record label. It doesn't mean they want to.
Yeah. Yeah.
And you know what? And we've talked about this a lot, is that congratulations. You have a recording studio, you're your own marketing manager, all this.
Self-distribute.
You know what? That's right. But it's a lot of work. I don't do my own taxes because could I do them? I suppose so. But I don't change my oil anymore.
There's
I don't do
only
my own
so many
brake
hours
jobs.
in a day.
That's right.
Somebody told me one time that when you're young, you have lots of time and no money, and then when you get a little older, you have a little bit of money and no time. And I think the older folks get, and that's part of it. But do you really want to spend your time doing some of these things? And that's really the basis of this article. And I try to avoid a lot of Web 3.0, NFT, DAO kind of discussions, unless it's something that I feel is really helpful. This article actually linked to one of my favorite articles that I highly recommend by Kevin Roose at the New York Times. The headline was "The Latecomer's Guide to Crypto," because, it's like my grandfather used to say, an idiot is someone who doesn't know what you just found out. And this stuff has been around like a week and a half. And yes, everybody's getting super excited about it. And some artists have made millions of dollars, and feels like there's a gold rush now. But the bottom line is an NFT is basically a digital collectible. And in order for somebody to purchase a digital collectible, there needs to be a demand for that. There needs to be a fan base, somebody who wants that. You're not just going to be a new developing artist and make a bunch of NFTs and get rich and you're done. And I think because of that gold rush mentality, you need an article like this that just says, let's calm down a minute here, right? And let me just read just like a first few sentences of this because it really sets the stage. It says, if you've spent any time on the internet this year, chances are you've heard about cryptocurrencies, NFTs, the metaverse, or Web3, maybe all of the above. I will spare you another long post explaining those things and what they mean, and if they will or won't change your life. If you listen to crypto, NFT, Web3 enthusiasts, they believe these new technologies will reshape the relationship between artist and fan, eliminating the meddling middleman. And he goes on to compare, the film industry and the music industry. And one of the quotes that jumped out at me, he said that a lot of people believe that the fan is the new record label. And when you have demand, that can be true when you're selling directly to that fan and you're selling high-priced, whether it's experiences or meet and greets and things like that. There can be that direct-to-fan. But for most artists, as they're starting out, they don't have that luxury. And as you point out, this is a lot of work.
It's a lot of work. He by the way, this is the Bloomberg newsletter that we're reading from, and this is Lucas Shaw. So he must have been at South by Southwest, because I think he talks about it in here.
Yeah.
But he does say something. He says, musicians have always hated record labels and viewed them as exploitative forces. They sign artists for long-term contracts, offering advances, blah, blah, blah. Filmmakers and screenwriters haven't been exploited in quite the same way, but studios discriminate against women and people of color, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But, the bottom line is he says, and yet the utopian view of fully decentralized media ecosystem ignores a simple fact.
There it is.
Most musicians, actors, writers, filmmakers, and creative people prefer the support of an institution with expertise.
There it is.
It makes their lives easier. Expertise. And, what do we essentially want from our artists? We want them to create great art. We don't necessarily care that they're good marketers. We want them to create great art. And so how can we enable that to happen? And it's not by making them do everything that they're not good at.
Right.
And this is the thing, and the music business, when we got into it, was it exploitative? Well, this is sort of, but don't forget, especially in those days, if you got signed, most labels really did the best they could do. They put you in a recording studio in a good recording studio with producers and engineers that have been in the business for a long time. They really tried to put all their resources to your career.
We saw it year after year, right?
That's right. And they put money into it.
A lot.
They invested a lot of money into it. So, so they took the risk, basically.
There it is,
and
the risk. And as you know, a majority of what they did that for didn't recoup, right? This business has a 93% failure rate. But, even those big successful labels like Atlantic and Republic and Interscope and so on, they have their misses. And so that's why they have to throw gasoline on those fires. I will never bash labels. You and I have worked for labels. We know the power of labels, and it comes down to resources. They talk about Dua Lipa, that she wouldn't be Dua Lipa if it weren't for the help of her managers or publisher and the record label. All of those partners took money off of her plate, but they also increased her total earnings. As you point out, it's A&R, it's, getting the right producer and the right sound and the right songs and making sure that music is as good as it can possibly be. But it's so much more than that. It's using those relationships that they have, whether it's with getting them on the right tour or getting them, some sync licenses, or there's a whole myriad of things that a really good label can take an artist to another level. And there's some luck involved in some of this. There's timing and seasonality and all of these things. But yes, a label today can be a bank to some folks, but not all of them. You get some of these labels where they're evangelists. They can take an artist to a whole nother level.
And that's in music, by the way. And as he says in the article, the resources required to make a movie are even greater. A writer-director can fund a movie and film it without the help of a major studio. Hundreds of people do it every year. But when a studio offers a director help, most of them say yes. Your life is a lot easier when someone else has to worry about finding financing, booking travel, hiring a crew, marketing a release, and securing distribution.
Yeah.
It really does make a difference when you're making the art. To have help with all of those other tangential things is crucial, I think.
Yeah.
It's asking way too much of creators to do all of that.
I agree. And I think that just because there's new technologies, you don't have to forsake previous technologies. I think they can all live side by side. We're working on a big release this year, and there's going to be NFT drops. There's going to be vinyl. There's going to be, everything along the way to serve the fan as best we can. In the article they point out, just because you build something new doesn't mean you have to tear down something old. Addison Rae used TikTok to get famous, but when she wanted to make a podcast, she signed with an agent. When she wanted to release music, she used a distributor. And when she wanted to act, she made a movie for Netflix. She got famous kind of on her own, but she needed help to build a career.
Yes, absolutely. And as he mentioned in this, centralization is also effective for customers. It's easier to log on to Spotify and find all the music in the world than having dozens of individual relationships with artists. A centralized service also allows people to discover songs and artists they wouldn't otherwise know. So, again, these are all things that, yes, things are changing, and there is this ability to do all of these things if you're a content creator, but do you want to? Again, I don't do my own dental work.
You don't?
No, I know. Sometimes I feel like I should, but I don't. And it's just, let's not throw the baby out with the bathwater, as to use a very old phrase. Yeah. But it is really, and a lot of great links here. And we'll see. Yes, the ability with all of these crypto, NFT, Web3 things. It does it can reshape the relationship between an artist and a fan. It can eliminate a middleman, but that's not always good.
Yeah, and I heard from a friend of mine last week that said, I am not ever going to buy a non-fungible token. For me, I love these artists. I'll buy their music. I'll go see them live. I'll even buy their T-shirt at the show. I have no desire to own a digital collectible. But that's okay. It's not for everybody. It's like collecting baseball cards. That piece of cardboard isn't worth hardly anything, but it could sell, some of them sell for hundreds of thousands of dollars, if not millions of dollars, because of scarcity and because they can prove that is the original, right? Yes. If you subscribe to Sherry Hu's Patreon, and I've mentioned this before, but it's such a great resource. One of the things that she has there is this really great database. She calls it her Music Web3 dashboard. And you can kind of keep a running total of music NFTs and watch the trends. And you can sort it by genre, artist, marketplace, whatever you want, total sale price. And you can kind of see the trend. And that trend is that the early days of these massive, drops of an NFT that sells for like $1 million, those are fewer and far between. It's really more about these digital collectibles, some of them tied to physical goods, some of them not. But here's an interesting stat from that, and that is that there have been 1.7 music NFTs sold since June of 2020, but there have only been 342 musicians who have sold NFTs. So it's still, let's just calm down a little bit. This is in its infancy. Yes, there are some people who have made a lot of money doing this. But if you have a fan base and they would like to have a digital collectible, then you can make revenue from this. And there are so many other uses for DAOs and NFTs and the blockchain and all of this. And we'll do our best to kind of cover this as we move forward, but let's just take a deep breath. It's new. We're all trying to kind of figure out how this is going to play and how it's going to be a part of these release cycles going forward.
Absolutely. Well, Jay, with that, let us wrap up episode number 85 as we call it a day. I want to thank, of course, the Music Business Association, Bandzoogle, Hypebot, and Bands in Town for their undying support. Boy, Jay,
we appreciate it.
Appreciate it, indeed. And Jay, I want you to have a good weekend since it's Saturday morning still for here.
You too, brother.
Record. All right, I'm going to try. Folks, thanks for listening in. Jay and I certainly appreciate it. We will see you next week on the Your Morning Coffee podcast.
You've been listening to Your Morning Coffee, the weekly music news program for the new music business. Join Jay Gilbert and Mike Etchart next time for the digital music news you need to know.